Wisdom, courage, temperance and justice. Be wise, be brave, be disciplined, be just. This is the second broadcast during this COVID lockdown. And the thing I wanted to talk about was a person's values. Not the values that they've been given, but more if they think deliberately, what are the values that they want to use in their lives as a benchmark for how they should live. So recently I've been reading a lot of Stoicism literature, and I noticed that in the Republic by Plato, he outlined 4 virtues. And these are the ones that were mentioned at the start of the recording. So, wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. And I think depending on the translations, it may be slightly different. But essentially, what it's saying is, in order to be a virtuous person, and he was talking about a city, but essentially you can kind of use it to describe an individual. So in order to be a virtuous person, you need to be wise, be brave, be disciplined, and be just. So if we go and break down each one of them, what does wisdom mean exactly? Well, wisdom is probably the acknowledgement that you don't know everything, and you will never know everything, and that you're not the best thing that the world has ever received. There have been people who've come before you, and they've done good as well, if not better than you. In the case of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and famous Stoic, I think there's a word they use for, not Stoic emperor, but let's say, philosopher king. So Marcus Aurelius was probably one of the greatest philosopher kings in history. He might even just be the only true philosopher king, actually. But anyway, so people like him, he was definitely a virtuous person. So the idea that I am more virtuous than Marcus Aurelius is probably absolute crap. So wisdom is acknowledging that. And what is the consequence of that? The consequence is that if you do not know everything, and if you know that you will never know everything, then you will seek out knowledge. You will seek out understanding of phenomena that you are not used to, you do not understand, and you do not have expertise in. And that's critically important for living a good life. And I'd almost argue that wisdom underpins the rest of the virtues. Because if you think you know everything, then actually there's no reason for you to be following these virtues, because you know everything. So just get on with your life, But if you do acknowledge that you don't know everything, then actually you need to seek wisdom. And it's by having that internal understanding that I do not know everything, it is almost impossible for me to know everything over the course of my lifetime. You'd literally need to live a lifetime where you are at your peak capabilities from the time that man was created or originated or born or evolved to the time that the last man is standing. And you'd have to live throughout all of that and consume all of the knowledge, every piece of it that's available throughout history to the present, to be able not to the present, but to the point of humanity being extinguished, if you are to have true wisdom. So essentially, as we know, that's taking it to an extreme, and it's pretty impossible. So no one knows everything, so therefore we should seek it out. And it does make me think about the scene in Game of Thrones. And this is for anyone who hasn't watched it or is planning to watch it. I would probably skip a few minutes, just so the spoiler, just so you don't get the spoiler, essentially. So, this is when King Joffrey passes away, and Tywin Lannister is essentially coaching King Tommen. And he asked him, like, what actually makes a good king? And I think they go through something like strength. And he talks about Robert Baratheon. He was strong, won a bunch of wars, but he basically ate, drank, and whored himself to death. So he can't really be a great king. Then I think they went and they said something along the lines of maybe being religious. And he was talking about how there was a king who was religious, and he did put all these, let's say, systems in place to make the kingdom better, but he also went a little bit over the top, and I think he appointed some little kid to a high position, or it might be some animal who's pretty something ridiculous like that, because, you know, the spirit told him so, or something like that. And then I'm trying to think. They also talked about, there was another one, and I don't know if this is just a case of maybe being good, like actually having goodness. And I think they mentioned that there was someone good, but the thing is, he was so good that someone evil, and I can't remember if it was his brother or his cousin, but essentially they overtook the kingdom and they absolutely ruined it. So the question that Tywin Lannister poses, well, he was a good man for sure, but was it a good thing for him to leave the kingdom in the hands of someone worse? And the answer was no, of course. So then Joffrey thinks about it, and then he talks about wisdom. And it's like, wisdom makes a good king. And Tywin Lannister says, yes, that's correct. And it's, you know, acknowledging that you don't know something, and then consulting, essentially. And he gave the example of, if I think there to maybe another house was asking for your ships or something like that, and he asked him something along the lines of, you know, do you have any experience? Would you know what to do? Do you have any experience in like warfare on the sea? And no, he didn't. So therefore, you get the right people in the room, you consult with them, and that, because you've acknowledged that you don't know something, you can then ask the right person and then make the right decision in that situation. So that's wisdom, and I think that was possibly one of the best scenes I have ever seen on TV in my entire 28 and let's say 28 and just over a half years of existence on this planet, because it really hammered in the importance of wisdom. So there you go. So that's the first virtue, wisdom. So the second virtue is courage. And courage is basically, it's not the absence of fear, but it's essentially the ability to put fear aside and take decisive action for a given situation. So a lot of the times, in certain positions, and I feel like the higher you go up the chain of command in kind of any area of life, you will have to start making decisions. You will have to take a lot of heat from people if they do go wrong. And if you know that something is the right thing to do, you just have to go for it, even if you're scared that things won't happen. And it's also about improving yourself. When you undertake the process of self-improvement, there's never a time when you are, there's never a time you can be comfortable, because by definition, if you are comfortable, then you're not improving. I'll take a very meathead example here and just say that if you're lifting weights and you're not pushing yourself and you don't have DOMs, if you're trying to, build muscle in the short term, or if you're trying to maintain your strength over time or improve it gradually over time, then if you're not improving the weights In which case, something, I don't know, if you're trying to bench, let's say, if you're benching 80 and you want to go for 100, that 100 is going to be far less comfortable than the 80 because you've done the 80 before. So by definition, if you want to improve, you have to face the discomfort and you have to have the courage to take the steps. Now, of course, the jump from 80 to 100 is probably a little bit too much, but what I'm saying is you can probably start increasing by 1.25 kilograms or 2.5 kilograms. So that's courage. And also, it's basically, you need to be able to face your fears when it's worth facing them. And also push yourself beyond your comfort zone. Those are probably the two. And also take decisive action when you know that you're doing the right thing, but you might fall under criticism. I think those are three big examples where courage is necessary. And I often think, in the case of, let's say, Bangladesh, when Bangladesh was still East Pakistan, and it was trying to get independence from West Pakistan, which is Pakistan in the current day, after Operation Searchlight, when a whole bunch of intellectuals were murdered, and there was a whole bunch of genocide being carried out for anyone who wanted to speak Bengali rather than Urdu, if people didn't have the courage, they were going up against a force that far outnumbered them, that was a lot more professional. If people didn't have the courage to step up and say enough is enough, I know this is the right thing to do. I know that it's scary. I know that I might die. We might lose, but fuck it. We really need to give it a go. We need to try our best and go for it. So my maternal grandfather, i.e. my nana, for those of you who from any South Asian cultures who might have a similar call your maternal grandfather something similar. So he actually volunteered and he joined what's called the Mukti Bahini, and he stayed until the war was finished. Now that required a lot of courage, and he went for it. And because of all the efforts of people, and because of India also in that situation, Indira Gandhi taking the decision to actually provide some support to Bangladesh with the Indian army, because of the courage of all these people, Bangladesh got independence, which is great. If that wasn't the case, then rather than speaking Sylheti, which is the language that my family speak, which is a regional dialect of Bengali, like a regional variation of Bengali, I guess. Instead of that, we'd be speaking Urdu against our will. So it was the courage of these people that actually made that happen. So courage is the second virtue. And also, here's the last thing I'll say about courage is that sometimes in order to be virtuous, especially in the face of situations that are not virtuous, or you're around people who are not virtuous, it takes some courage to still do the right thing. So that's the second virtue. The third one, temperance. And that could be translated as self-control. I prefer to go with the self-discipline translation. So essentially, you need to have discipline if you want to be virtuous, because you don't want to overdo anything. Overdoing anything almost always leads to terrible consequences. It almost doesn't matter what scenario of life you're talking about. Overdoing will screw things up, and this is especially true when it comes to vices. So you want to control your vices. So let's take some common vices. Let's say smoking, taking drugs. Let's say I'm trying to think of some really weird ones, but let's say overeating. Overeating for sure, and eating and drinking crap, drinking a lot of alcohol. I'm trying to think of some other ones, but it's a little bit hard to recall. And then I'm going to take one slightly out of the box one, but let's say using prostitutes. So, and then using hard drugs. Let's go for hard drugs. So, of those, using prostitutes and using drugs. So, drugs will give you a feeling that everything's great, everything's okay, but you haven't actually earned it. We generally have positive chemicals that get released into us when either we do challenging things or we do something that is a little bit intense, essentially. So the challenging things are you set an objective and you work towards it, and once you get it, your brain will inevitably release some serotonin. And serotonin is, ironically, it helps with courage, because it makes you even more courageous when you face an obstacle the next time, because you were just able to overcome one. So you've got that. And then you've also got the common one, which happens after you work out hard, which is the endorphins. So all of these give you positive emotions, but you've actually earned it by doing something. Whereas drugs will give you that same buzz, but you've done nothing to earn it. So how do you avoid that? Well, you're going to need to apply some discipline. Because if you just take the drugs and go for the positive results without earning it, then that's pretty much the easy way. We can all feel good by shooting up with some heroin or something. Now, obviously, put aside the fact that there's long-term consequences to these things. I'm thinking very short-term. But the act of thinking about consequences long-term is exercising discipline. So, short-term, you could shoot up and spend all day just lying there feeling fucking fantastic, But it's terrible, because there you go. You've got some long-term consequences that you have to put up with. So you need to have the discipline to not overdo it. In the same way with drinking, it's like if you've decided that you want to achieve, let's say, 6%, 7%, 8% body fat, which is a very tough number to achieve, alcohol is not going to help you. So if you drink a bunch of alcohol, you're not going to get there. So you need to exercise some discipline. And then at the more lower levels, like overeating, that can be a problem, because it's going to make you put on some weight, and that's terrible in the long run. So as a result of discipline in the short run, if you keep doing it again and again, in the long run, you'll be overweight and stuff like that. And to be honest, overeating is something that I have struggled with massively. I know, ironically, as a kid, I didn't eat much, but growing up, I think, doing stressful jobs and stuff, it made me overeat a lot. So I had to, it's something I have to consciously get under control. So there you go. That's discipline. And essentially that falls under the temperance category. And the thing is, once again, all of these virtues are interlinked. So you're going to need discipline to be able to do the others properly, because none of that is easy. But the whole thing about discipline is that you delay gratification in the short term to be able to achieve something in the long term. So virtues are not easy. They're simple to understand, but they are definitely not easy. And the only way to do all the virtues, well, let's say practice the virtues properly, is by exercising self-discipline. So there you go. That's the third one. The fourth one is justice. So being a just person, what does that mean? That means that you're fair in every dealing. And it does require, in my opinion, a lot of objectivity. Because if you're not an objective person, then you're just going to let your whatever biases you have, whatever issues you've had in the past, you're going to let those things affect your judgment. And therefore, you won't be just in making your decisions or behave and how you behave towards someone. So this one's, I guess, interestingly, all the others are probably more internal ones, and this one's more external. This one's how do you behave with the world. And I guess I think justice becomes even more important, and the situations where you really have to prove, where you really can prove whether you're a just person or not, is situations where you are in a position of power, where you can misuse the power for your benefit, even if it means making someone else feel shit and making other people feel bad. And the just person in that situation would fight against the instinct, even if they do have it, to abuse that power, put it aside, and still do the right thing. So that's why justice is important. So there you go. So to summarize, the 4 virtues are wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. So essentially, be wise, be brave, be disciplined, and be just. So it's definitely, these are an example of some virtues that I like, and so they're helping drive my own personal values now. But it's definitely worth asking the question of, what are your standards of behavior? What's acceptable? What standards will you set for yourself that no one else is holding you accountable to, but you are holding yourself accountable to? Because having those there will definitely help you relate better to yourself and keep doing the right thing by you, but also doing it by other person. And that's just great for society overall. So to end this, and I'm going to end this with with every single thing that we do, I'm going to end it like this. So remember, don't ever forget wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. So whatever you do in life, try your best to be wise, be brave, be disciplined, and be just. Have a good day. Bye.